Before I introduce the speaker for today, I want to share a few facts about Joshua Ellis and why we all who live in Yorkshire should be very proud of this company. Means Joshua Ellis opened in 1767. Now imagine about it. They have a history which is more than 250 years, but they only were ever owned by only three families. It shows the value of heritage. Now, Joshua Ellis is not only heritage, but it is cutting edge. And they are producing luxury cashmere fabric accessories in Yorkshire and exporting that to uh, the best of the brands throughout the world. So they are really flying the flag of Yorkshire very high. Uh, the kind of theme of this public lecture series is obviously we have our heritage, but we are proud that we are cutting edge. And I think Joshua Ellis represent that value because uh, not only the heritage side and what we discussed today, they are cutting edge. They're trying to reinvent themselves. Means I was having a chat with our presenter today, and Oliver was saying to me that they have ambitions that in next 2 years they will not use any single-use plastics in their supply chain. Well, in their packaging. That shows the value of the company. Now, that nicely brings me to introduce you to Oliver Platts. Now, we are really privileged to have managing director of Joshua Ellis, Oliver Platts, with us today. Uh, Oliver was born in Huddersfield, and then he went to Scotland. He went to London and worked there for more than 14 years. But obviously, he come back to Yorkshire on February 2017 to join as the managing director of this company. Now, obviously, I thought that is because he loves Yorkshire and he wants to be with us. But he said that is because his dog will have larger grounds to run. And that is why he's back in Yorkshire. But after he joined Joshua Ellis, their turnover went up 60% and their profitability went up 200%. So I think we only can thank Joshua's dog for bringing him back to Yorkshire. And with that note, I'll hand over the virtual stage to Oliver. Thank you, Oliver.
Well, thanks, Parik. And firstly, thank you for everyone joining us today, and certainly for having me as part of this series. I think it's very kind of you to make that introduction, but it's very privileged of me to be asked to join a distinguished panel of lectures that you have over the course of the next few weeks. And of course, Adam's last week as well. I'm slightly out of my comfort zone here. This is not the way I normally do my day-to-day, and it's only been 7 months of using Zoom every day. So I will just try and share my screen, and hopefully we'll be able to just do a very quick PowerPoint presentation about Joshua Ellis and who we are. So I'm hoping everyone can see that. Parik, maybe you could just nod and say that that's definitely okay. Perfect. So yeah, so this is the original mill in the centre of Batley, which is a little mill town in between Leeds, Bradford, and Huddersfield. We're about 10 miles as the crow flies from Huddersfield University. We've had a long-standing relationship with the university. We're now no longer in this site. The business was restructured about 20 years ago when it was bought by a family-owned business in Bradford. We're now part of the SIL Holdings Group, which is a family-owned vertical textile business based in Bradford. So we moved to a slightly smaller site, but this is where the business grew over the 18th, 19th century. So it was founded in 1767 as a woolen mill. And around about that time, the area Batley Dewsbury was known as the shoddy area. And what that was essentially waste manufacturing and recycling. So little did we know it, but we were very on trend back in the 18th and 19th century, given we were an integral part of the textile recycling and the circular economy, which is now something which is hugely on trend. This sort of product was called ragwool, and this is an example now of the sort of thing that used to get made. This sort of product was made up using various different fibers and waste, essentially, made into a cheap cloth for cleaning, for uniforms. And it was shipped around the world, predominantly to poorer parts of the world. At the time, one of the biggest markets was the USA and Canada, where this sort of product would be overdyed and used in US Civil War uniforms, for example. And it was around about this time that Yorkshire was the woolen fabric capital of the world. I'm very proud, having been born in Huddersfield, to say that Huddersfield really did give birth to luxury fabric, and it was at this time that it was at its absolute peak. What today we're going to talk about is around change and pivoting. And Joshua Ellis, over the last 250 years, in order to survive in this industry, has had to pivot on numerous occasions. It's supplied army uniforms to the Redcoat Army. Before the First World War, we saw the rise of branded business with brands that are well known now, such as Crombie, Burberry, becoming very prevalent and big customers. In the Second World War, the business supplied, this is the management team from the 1920s here. The chap at the front is the guy that did my job back in the 1920s. In the Second World War, we supplied fabrics to the army. We even developed a fabric alongside the RAF, which was a heavy wool fabric, which was designed to line the petrol tanks of Spitfires, so that if petrol tanks were shot through, that the wool would essentially fill the gap where the bullet had been and stop the petrol from leaking out. That's a fabric which actually is still in our collection today, and actually has been used by a number of customers in the last 10 years. After the Second World War, the business had to pivot again. Through the 60s, 70s and 80s, a lot of offshoring was happening in this part of the world. A lot of mills in Yorkshire and Lancashire were closing down. So the business had to pivot by moving more up market, specializing in the production of cashmere and moving into accessories. And for many years, the business was one of the largest scarf manufacturers in the world, but always under someone else's brand. More recently, we've again evolved to launch our own brand. And this is the sort of example of fabrics that we're now manufacturing. Givenchy, Chanel, Bottega Veneta, just to name 3 customers. So we launched our own brand in 2014 to produce cashmere scarves. We opened a showroom in Tokyo in 2015. We launched our new website in 2017 and sold direct to the consumer for the first time. In 2018, we launched our first ever pop-up shop in Omotesando Hills in Tokyo, which was great success and continued for 2019 as well. And now, fast forward to today, we have a profitable business selling in over 30 countries around the world. So when Parik asked me to do a lecture, well, he didn't actually ask me to do a lecture, he asked me to say a few words. So I was quite surprised looking at Adam's lecture last week, which sort of went on for half an hour and was in huge detail and sort of got me very panicked. I thought that the best thing to do would be to talk about the phenomenal amounts of change that's going on within the fashion textile industry at the moment, or that has been happening over the last 5 years and has really been accelerated by COVID. And hopefully to discuss how textile and fashion graduates can take advantage of this at the moment. What I've tried to do, and this is not coming from a textbook. I'm not coming from a point of huge numbers of facts. I'm coming from my experience, the experience that we have within our industry, and the conversations that I have with other people within the industry at the moment. Bear in mind, we work in a luxury space, in a high-end premium space. So that's the angle that I'm coming from. Do bear in mind that this is not coming from a textbook. This is very much coming from me. But I wanted to explain what I call a cycle of change, which I think is happening at the moment. And this is designed to show that change within this industry at the moment is not a chain. It doesn't start at a point and end at a point. We're in a cycle which is driving continual evolution of an age-old industry that will lead to significant opportunities for companies and individuals now and in the future. I'm going to go into more detail on each point, but I've tried to narrow it down to 5 main areas that I think are driving this change. There will be more than this, I'm sure, There'll be offshoots of these as well, but these 5 points, in my view, are the key ones at the moment. So starting at the top, we're seeing unprecedented changes in the way that the fashion industry engages with the environment. This in turn is one of the main factors driving a revolution in innovation across the field of fashion and textiles. And we're very proud that companies and universities in Yorkshire and the UK are at the forefront of this research. Innovation is in turn revolutionising the skills within the industry, and creating new opportunities for graduate level roles and new areas of craftsmanship to be given an audience. New products means new ways of promoting to a new marketplace with rapidly evolving routes to market. And this is then in turn driving a seismic shift in consumer sentiment and customer behaviour. This shift in consumer attitudes is then driving further change in environment and sustainability, and so the cycle starts again. Again, I said this is not based on hard facts, but it is based on what we are seeing at the moment. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. If I may, stop sharing. There we are. Big red button. There we go. Okay. So I think actually, as opposed to starting at the environment, environment sustainability is the area that a lot of people are very keen on at the moment. But I'm actually going to start with consumer behavioural change, because Adam started his lecture last week saying he was going to try and avoid talking about COVID because he wanted to keep things upbeat, and he's absolutely right. At the moment, just turning on the news sometimes is hugely depressing. But I'm going to mention it quite a bit today because it's fundamentally accelerating an awful lot of change. And I think I need to try and get across the opportunities that this may have for those of us that are watching that are graduates or undergraduates. So we're seeing a huge number of changes in recent months, never mind years, on the back of the pandemic. We're seeing a much greater percentage spend in personal and mental well-being. So brands involved in fitness, for example, are continuing to thrive. We're seeing more people spending money on their homes. So brands are starting to offer a much wider range of products. We've just launched, for example, a range of cashmere bed socks. That's all designed around cocooning, this idea of cashmere being something that you can have by the fire, you can wear it to bed. It makes you feel better about life at the moment. And we're launching a new home collection in Q1 at the beginning of next year. There are fewer people traveling to work. So garments are now being designed to be worn up or worn down. And this is having a knock-on effect on fabric and fabric manufacturing. We've developed a range of fabrics which are lighter weight. We also work with a fantastic fibre called Escorial wool, which has a natural crease resistance, which offers much greater flexibility for that side of things as well. I'm sure people have seen that this idea of Zoom fashion, the idea of people making products which are designed to highlight themselves and just their upper half, and it's purely for video conferencing. I believe that eyeliner sales, for example, are at an all-time high. And as people have been asked to stay at home and maybe not been able to go abroad this year, they've rediscovered a sense of adventure and outdoor life, which means a resurgence in technical outdoor and rugged clothing as well. This is all against the backdrop of a number of changes in recent years. Fundamentally, we've seen a significant move towards digital and away from bricks and mortar, particularly in the luxury space. It's expected that 25% of all luxury sales in 2025 will be online, and that's compared to 10% in 2018. We're also seeing seismic shifts in buying power moving from the west to the east. China is expected to account for over 50% of all luxury sales by 2025. And that's a huge knock-on effect for any company trying to get into that space, whether it's the fit, the cut, the color, the design. That's a significant thing that people need to take into account. More and more people in the luxury space are investing in experiences and not quite as much on actual physical things. So retail has been adapting to include coffee shops, lifestyle products, and innovative technology within their bricks and mortar stores to keep their offers fresh and exciting. There's been a significant move towards customization, and now it's common to be able to personalize a wide range of products. There's children's books, leather handbags. It's also led to a significant increase in made-to-measure tailoring, particularly in markets in the Far East, such as China and Korea. We've also seen a big move towards product specialism. Historically, a gentleman who was a fan of the brand would often go into one store and buy his suits, his shirts, his shoes, his socks, his underpants, everything from the one brand. But we're now seeing that same person will go and buy their shoes from Crockett & Jones, their tie from Drake's, their scarf hopefully from Joshua Ellis, their knitwear from Johnson's of Elgin, etc. They're doing this because they're interested in the stories behind these brands and the provenance of what they do. And because of this, we're seeing a resurgence in manufacturing brands. And the consumers got all of this because that information is now readily available online, and the brands themselves are making that information readily available. As a result, because of this, we're seeing a trend of people slowly starting to consider clothing as more of an investment and something to be looked after. If you buy a good pair of Northamptonshire shoes, or a cashmere jumper made in Scotland, or a cashmere scarf made in Batley, if you look after it, it really should last you a lifetime. We've recently filmed a series of short films advertising this fact. This consumer trend of buying fewer items and buying better is a consequence of understandable concerns around the environment. And this in turn is driving the fashion industry to act on its carbon footprint, its waste, and the sustainability of its supply chain. So that leads me on to the environment and sustainability, which is the second point. Clearly, there's a lot of renewed interest in the environment in recent years, particularly with a younger luxury consumer, which has forced luxury brands to act. And we now have a situation where almost all luxury brands or groups have set a non-negotiable deadline of when they will have a fully sustainable supply chain. That is at the moment roughly somewhere between 2023 and 2025. Now, I've always worked in natural fibres, and I'll argue that wool from a sheep or a goat is by its very nature sustainable, that it grows back every year, and as it comes essentially from the earth, it doesn't add to the landfill issue. You can just bury a cashmere jumper and it will break down naturally. As a manufacturer in the UK that is regularly audited by very large brands, we also adhere to a wide range of legislation, such as action on modern slavery, use of azo dyes, treatment of wastewater and effluent, power saving, etc., etc. The list goes on. And as British manufacturers, sometimes we don't shout enough about this sort of thing. This is just what we do on our day-to-day. We have to accept, however, that there is work to do on things like pasture management, ensuring herders and farmers are coming through into the industry, as well as good animal husbandry practices and non-mules and mulesing. As a business, we and many other British mills and manufacturers are working with the Sustainable Fibre Alliance on cashmere and the Responsible Wool Standard on wool, with a view to offering fully accredited fabrics and scarves within the next 6 to 12 months. Then there are things that we can do ourselves, such as bringing in paper recycling schemes and removing all single-use plastics. These also can have economic benefits. A couple of years ago, when I was looking at our stationery budget, I was petrified by how much money we were spending on paper. So one day, without telling anyone, I asked the IT department to turn on a little button which defaulted everyone to printing on double-sided instead of single-sided. And after a few initial grumbles, I took great pleasure in telling everyone a few months later that not only had we saved around 20 trees, we'd also paid for the Christmas party. The fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world, and 10% of all global carbon emissions are linked to the industry. Undoubtedly, fast fashion has got the most to answer for here. And it's estimated that 85% of all clothes around the world will only last 1 year or less. Microplastics in certain clothes as well are one of the largest pollutants in our oceans. It's also interesting to see that with the rise in online clothes shopping and high levels of returns, I'm sure we all know someone that buys more than one size and simply returns one that doesn't fit. Every time that happens, they are contributing to the carbon footprint of the fashion industry. So on the one hand, we are as manufacturers being driven to shore up our existing supply chains, whether it be through the SFA or the RWS. But then on the other hand is the new innovation around plant-based yarns. And there's a significant amount of research going into this. Adam mentioned last week around the leather made from pineapple skins, or jeans made from banana peel. And I can add to that yarns that we're now seeing coming through made from natural products such as seaweed, bamboo, nettles, as well as yarns made from recycled products such as plastic bottles. So this leads nicely onto innovation within textiles. I'm very conscious of my audience here, and particularly in light of the lecture last week, which went into this in a lot more detail than I would ever be able to give. However, I can certainly confirm that innovation within textiles in the luxury space is definitely happening. And some of the trends that Parik and his team are seeing in other sectors, such as defence and aerospace, are starting to filter through to the high-end fashion as well. I know of at least one luxury brand label this year who is only accepting fabrics with nano coating to ensure 100% waterproofing without affecting the luxurious handle of the fabric. And that's just one example of how this is changing. As a member of the Future Fashion Factory, we've had numerous discussions with Parik and his team, and some of the work they're doing to streamline the mechanics behind the industry is staggering. Whether that is plasma finishing to eradicate water use in the finishing process, or treating yarns to change colour for sampling, it's going to revolutionise fundamental areas of our business. Currently, things like sampling is a huge issue, and the lead times required to produce fabrics, which would normally 3 to 6 weeks, could be dramatically reduced by treating yarns to change colour. And I know that there's a lot of other things underway to try and reduce this time frame, allowing brands to make decisions with more up-to-date insight. The fundamentals of selling are also being turned on the head as well. We'll talk about this in a bit, but I know that there's work being undertaken on allowing customers to digitally feel the quality of a fabric using technology without a fabric swatch actually being there. So with innovation and ultimately increased automation, which I know Adam spoke about last week, comes a fundamental shift in the skills required in the industry. The skills within the fashion and textile industry are changing rapidly, and it's incredibly important for us within the industry to push back against this stereotype of dark, satanic Victorian mills or creativity being pitch holders just crafting. It is true that we rely on a skill base that is often passed down through many generations, and we have a number of people in our business who have been with us for 30, 40, even 50 years in some instances, all from within the local community. There is a good career in textile manufacturing for someone that wants to make stuff and progress through to middle and upper management through hard work, organisation and diligence. At Joshua Ellis, we now have 20% of our workforce either enrolled in or having completed a textile apprenticeship scheme. And these young people are now being multi-skilled across all areas of the manufacturing process to future-proof their careers and to give them a broader spectrum of textile manufacturing. When I joined the business, I was the fourth youngest person in the business at the age of 35. And I'm delighted now to see so many young faces in the business, and I consider myself much more middle-aged. In the luxury space, the idea of value creation is also changing. Historically, the bulk of the value of a luxury item has been in the raw product going into it, whether it's the finest cashmere fibre or softest of leathers. However, with new fibres and automation, the value of the product is down more and more to the craftsmanship behind it. The hours put in to hand stitch a collar onto a coat or a sole onto a pair of shoes. In my last company, there was a couture customer who sent back over 20 different attempts at hand embroidery of their logo on a cashmere scarf. They had seamstresses leaving their shift in tears, but they kept going, and finally, once it was perfected, it was really worth it. And the sense of satisfaction was amazing. And that customer now remains loyal year in, year out. However, the industry is evolving at such a rapid pace that there are huge numbers of new areas where graduate levels are required. The ecosystem around fashion and textiles is the same as many other industries. At Joshua Ellis, we have a finance director who's younger than me and loves the fact we work with world famous brands from our little site in Batley. Within our wider group of businesses, we have HR, health and safety, technologists, designers, production management, fibre and yarn buyers, commodity traders, quality control managers, a marketing team, a PR team, and a sales team. And these are all roles that are on offer within the fashion and textile industry in many other businesses. It's also one of the best industries for embracing and rewarding creativity. And that's not just in design creativity, but creativity in the way business is being done. And that is all down to the speed at which it is evolving. So that leads us on to the changing in the routes to market. And again, we're seeing huge levels of disruption in this area, with greater access direct to consumer and the continued rise of e-commerce. Bricks and mortar footfall in Europe is down 80% so far this year due to the pandemic. And this has turbocharged the move towards e-commerce across the globe. You only have to look at brands that have entered the fashion space relatively recently and become multi-billion-dollar businesses overnight. Brands like Gymshark, Everlane, Lululemon, RJ, and Allbirds have all launched on the scene with a predominantly online, direct-to-consumer model and a very simple, clear message, which has resonated with a new consumer, and they've thrived. Online marketplaces such as Amazon, Rakuten, Tmall, and JD.com now give you a ready-made audience, and they are becoming more important to a luxury consumer as well. For example, Tmall in China has had its luxury pavilion for a number of years, and Amazon has just launched its luxury stores platform last month. Brands and retailers are also now using technology that has become part of the norm in recent months. Luxury watch brand Hublot now have a dedicated showroom in their New York store, where customers can book appointments and have a video call to review the range of watches and make purchases there and then to be shipped out that day. Top department stores such as Galeries Lafayette and Selfridges are now using the same technology to connect with their high-end customer base that can't visit the store. There's a messaging app called Hero, which is allowing brands and retailers to chat live with customers and bring the feel of offline shopping to online. The service allows sales associates to work from home, build and maintain relationships with customers, answering detailed and specific questions about products, and boosting customer confidence before they make a purchase. And there's a number of brands now starting to find this sort of video direct to consumer stuff very interesting as well. Since COVID, we've seen a significant rise in live streaming, particularly in China, and the sales of this are expected to reach over 120 billion euros this year alone. Many of the tour group companies who used to bring Chinese tourists to Europe are now trying to take Europe to China and are promoting European brands through this new platform. It's early days, but some of the sales figures I've seen have been very encouraging. The traditional wholesale model has also changed forever. Historically, it would look a bit like this. You design a collection, you make a collection, you go to a bunch of trade shows and see as many customers as you can. They request some samples, so you send those out. They then give you a bespoke design, so you do that and work on that and send them the CADs. They sign those off and you get a sample order, and then if they like that, then you get a bulk order. Now we're seeing the rise of online showrooms with 3D photography of product. Virtual reality is starting to play a part as well. It started as a retail initiative, but now companies like Prada are using virtual reality to capture fans of the brand at home with an immersive VR experience available on YouTube, and taking them on trips to locations including Tokyo, New York, and Milan, while allowing them to get up close and personal with the Spring 2020 collection. That's not to say that bricks and mortar is dead, but the requirement for experience alongside traditional retail is more important than ever. I mentioned earlier that many brands are now putting coffee shops in their stores or reading areas. Italian brand Slowware has a new experiential store in Milan called Slowware 18, and it's an evolving space that caters to shoppers from day and night. So every day after 7 p.m, the store transforms into a cocktail bar and a cafe, serving drinks and snacks, and still allows people to purchase as well. Marketing has evolved incredibly in recent years, and content is now a major new currency for brands. The importance of staying up to date and relevant is more challenging than ever. Social media has revolutionized and personalized advertising, and influencer marketing is now one of the most important facets of any marketing campaign. I read recently of a t-shirt brand that launched a few years ago with a loan of £20,000. After an initial period of product development, the founder of this business, who I think was either in school or was at university, one or the other, launched a website on a very basic platform on a dropship model from his factory partner in Turkey. And that was 50% of his initial £20,000 loan. He then took the other £10,000 and paid two Z-list celebrities £5,000 each to wear his t-shirts and to do 5 posts over a period of 6 months. When that 6 months was up, he'd made enough money to pay 2 slightly higher profile celebrities to do the same, and so on. And now the business is turning over £20 million. And to this day, the founder of that business has not physically seen or touched any of his t-shirts. This, in a microcosm, is the level of disruption in the industry that we are seeing today. And from there, I take you back to that cycle of change that we looked at the start, and we move back to consumer sentiment. Will this brand of t-shirt get found out? Will it be discovered that his t-shirts are made in sweatshops? And will the consumer shift again to want something different? And so the cycle begins again. The question for all of us is, what is the next trend going to be? And who are going to be the companies that evolve quickest or start up the fastest to take advantage? And with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Oliver. Brilliant. I really feel we saw a glimpse into the industry, which is really what we want. Oliver, the first thing comes to my mind is we obviously work as an ecosystem, right? And I know you are very passionate about developing the Yorkshire PLC brand. Obviously, the universities is playing a role in that. The companies are playing a role in that. So my question is, what is your view of the future of Yorkshire textiles and fashion industry, and how excited young talent should be to be part of this industry going forward?
Well, yeah, obviously, Parik, a proud Yorkshireman I am, and I think that I think you only have to look at certain areas, such as made in Italy, made in Scotland, and the impact that has, that resonates very well with a luxury customer base around the world. And it fundamentally comes from everybody working together and on their own. You know, Italy has a reputation for quality because a lot of the companies in Italy are manufacturing very high-end quality products, and they all support each other. The same in the Made in Scotland brand. I think there is then an element of government and regional tourist boards and various other things of working together to try and promote brand Yorkshire, brand Scotland, brand Italy, whatever it may be. And I think there's a lot more that we can do there. But certainly, I do find that the Brits tend to hide their light under a bushel a little bit. We tend not to tell too many people about it. I can't tell you how positive Huddersfield getting into the Premier League was for our business in China when people started to hear the name Huddersfield again. And then when you start talking to them about the birth of luxury fabric and all this sort of stuff, it was remarkable. So I think there's a lot more we can do as far as bringing young people through. It's been a significant passion of mine. It's a passion of our production director, which is why we invest and try to encourage our apprentice program with the Textile Centre of Excellence every year as well, and certainly engaging with the universities, whether it be directly as the relationship that you and I have, or whether it's through the Future Fashion Factory as well. It's all about working together on that, I think.
That is great. It's also about, Oliver, I think that we are trying to do now together is to follow the policy framework together with the industry so that we can understand how the future landscape looks like, so that we can prepare our industry for the future.
Yes. And of course, the one thing we haven't talked about is obviously Brexit. I made a very conscious decision not to bring that up as well. But clearly, we have a significant number of macroeconomic and global things happening at the moment, which are affecting change and will continue to affect it. And it's about being fleet-footed. It's about being quick with decision making. And I think a lot of the British mills and manufacturing and brands, to an extent, are much better placed to do that than a lot of our competition. If you go to, I know of mills in other parts of the world where they are literally looking at millions of meters down per year. A reduction in a mill like ours is not going to have quite as much of an impact. But it also means that because we're smaller, because we make decisions here, we can act on those things quite quickly and hopefully make the best of a very challenging environment.
That is great. Mitch, that actually nicely leads us into the next question from one of our audience members. You talked about, I'm just reading the question from here. You talked about China as a rapidly growing market. Do you think the UK's geographic location relative to China will be an issue, or is it reputation, quality, heritage of high-end UK fashion and textiles more likely to benefit the UK industry overall?
Yeah, I think the Chinese market is in fabric, in our core business, is hugely loyal to brands, and they are still a very brand-driven marketplace. they are driving luxury sales for a reason, and they buy into the stories that they are told. They also have a huge affinity to made in Italy, and it is the Italian and the French brands that have, outside of Burberry, that really have a foothold in that space. But there are examples now of when companies can get a foothold in that market, they can see rapid growth. My previous company, Johnsons of Elgin, I know are doing fantastic things in that market with, they actually, because I was involved in that, went down the route of getting a graduate in, who came in, who was a Mandarin speaker, who got that ball rolling, who was able to communicate with people in the market. And that has been a massive thing, because they are starting to understand British culture and that is and quality of manufacturing. So it is certainly starting to improve. It's also a market that at the moment doesn't have a traditional wholesale multi-brand department store model, really. It's very much an online cross-border e-commerce, but there are plenty of people available that you can work with to get yourselves into that, whether it be to Tmall, JD.com, or one of the other platforms. But that is probably one of the major things that's happening. Yeah.
Well, I can't make it up. That nicely actually goes into the next question. It's just randomly coming from audience, and it is making sense. Now, this question is from our subject lead, Nicola Redmore. Now, just to give you a background, I have rarely seen anybody who is more passionate about the Huddersfield textile industry than Nicola, and she was also the ex-president of Huddersfield Textile Society. Now, I think she's asking a very relevant question here, which leads to your last answer. What mechanism are Joshua Ellis employing to meet the customer desire for customization? Now, she's putting this context, putting this question in the context of, we know with the textile industry, there is long lead times and stuff like that. How can we meet? How can we play a role as a university to meet that last moment customization that the consumer wants, working with Joshua Ellis?
Yeah. Well, it's not easy, because outside of taking a scarf and embroidering it for an end consumer, which is now something that is quite par for the course, but it's certainly something that is quite widespread. We touched on it earlier. I think things like in the luxury space, things like giving an end consumer the opportunity to design and develop their own 7-meter fabric length of cashmere for a jacketing, because that customer maybe is prepared to pay for it and wants to know that no one else in the world, he's not going to walk into his Christmas party and see someone wearing the same jacket. And there's a story behind it for him or her to tell their guests or whatever it may be. I think that's the sort of thing that we're already working on that with one, maybe two, certainly one at the moment, major global luxury brand that has a client base where they can literally go out and say, look, how about this? But that means that we have to put in an infrastructure around that. We probably have to have a loom dedicated to that. We have to have a dedicated finishing route. We have to ensure that yarns are available in certain quantities to enable us to turn it around, because as you say, that turnaround time is very tight. So there's a significant amount of infrastructure that has to go into making something like that work. And I think that anything that can be done from a technical point of view or an innovation point of view to allow either a shortening of that lead time or a way of reducing changeover time on looms or anything like that, or improving or speeding up the finishing process, anything like that, Parik, is going to be very valuable going forward, because it's certainly a trend that we don't envisage going away. The luxury consumer continues to want customization. They're prepared to pay for it. We're a small mill, a relatively small mill that can do short runs without drastically affecting our efficiencies. So how can we, for example, be better placed than someone else to take advantage of that going forward?
That is really good to know, Oliver, because as a department of fashion and textiles, what you just said, that brings all our functions together, because we have fashion design which relates to that, textile design, even costume design, right? And then a big part of our department is fashion communication. So I think it actually shows that this wings of our department to work this wings of our department to work together to create that.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about sustainability a lot, and rightly so. Obviously, if we can make a garment of our choice, naturally the sustainable life of that garment goes up. But somebody from the audience asked another question, that can you see luxury products have potential market in the second-hand market as well? Because mainly in the COVID market, because obviously if we can sell a product second-hand as well, then we are increasing the useful life of that instead of throwing it into the landfill. So do you have any thought about it?
Well, the circular economy is certainly something that's becoming hugely relevant, discussed regularly. I know there's an awful, in the luxury space, there are now e-commerce platforms like Vestiaire that specialize in pre-owned items of clothing. You're now seeing things like, I think I'm right in saying that Oxfam recently did a pop-up shop in Selfridges for high-end vintage pieces. Before COVID, you go to Ralph Lauren store, the Ralph Lauren store in Bond Street, and the whole ground floor was taken over to an exhibition of vintage Ralph Lauren garments, which was curated by Depop. So it is already happening, and I think that this idea of essentially customization, but vintage customization, is already happening. And as I said, in the luxury space, hopefully, if something's been made very well, it should be able to last a long time. I think the other area is, before you even get to that point, there's a lot of work going into the circular economy before it actually gets made into a product. So actually, as opposed to it being sold on, that jumper or jacket or whatever it may be is shredded, taken back to the original yarn, and then recycled into a new fabric. And there's been an awful lot of work going into that now, and a lot of mills are offering recycled fabrics. We have a part recycled cashmere yarn string that we can work with and do work with on a number of qualities for certain brands. At the moment, there are elements of concerns around quality and the staple length of the fibre in recycled. I think there's also question marks around the actual carbon footprint of the recycling process versus actually just getting the virgin element, getting that right, and working on the animal husbandry and the pasture management. So it's certainly an area of it's certainly very much ongoing at the moment. And we know, I know of one luxury brand already that's approached us and said that this year, if they're buying cashmere, categorically it has to be certified recycled cashmere.
Okay.
So we're already starting to see that coming through as well. Now, whether or not that's something that's going to continue, or whether or not that's a bit of a trend thing, I think companies like ours, supply chains, are basically wanting to get the virgin processing of cashmere and wool right. We want to get the animal husbandry right. We want to get all that side of things environmental and sustainable, and then that in our world is probably the ideal way forward. But recycling isn't going to go away.
That is great. Means that actually answers one of the questions from my friend and colleague Bruce, who asked exactly that question, and you answered that. One of the question I just got is wondering if you know the reason behind your focus on cashmere. What is the luxury brand choice? And it goes, the question really leads to, have you ever considered more local wools to add to the Yorkshire heritage in your products?
Yeah, I can't exactly pinpoint when Joshua Ellis, the year that it started to move towards cashmere. I think like a lot of these things, it tends to be market driven. So at some point, somebody will have said, "Can you start making some cashmere scarves for us?" And that would have started from there. And then within that, an ecosystem builds up. Machinery gets bought, techniques get perfected. It's strange because this part of the world historically is a worsted. It's a worsted area, and to have a woolen spun mill in this area is quite unusual. I can't pinpoint that exact moment. And again, cashmere, it will be the reason why we did it. It will be because it's market driven. I think that's probably the main reason why we got into it. I think as far as the locality of the wools, I think it's certainly something that I know we have done in the past. We've made rugs out of British wool. I probably don't need to speak to many people on here, but traditionally British wools are much coarser. The breeds and the climate tend to mean that most of the wool, the British sheep, tends to go into carpets. But we've certainly looked into it. I think historically, I know of people who have tried to farm cashmere goats in the UK, and it just hasn't worked because of the climate. We're far too temperate, and it needs to have the extremes of weather to get the very soft, high levels of very fine fiber. So but we've done commissions. We've done commission weaving. I know in the past for a lady that has an alpaca farm. We have done various things like that. We are flexible and we are happy to do it. And I think that certainly going forward, as things continue to develop, the requirement to do more local fibres will definitely happen. And I do know that a lot of breeds are starting to we are starting to get a little bit more success out of British wool farms as well.
Absolutely.
Get a softer, more merino-like wool fibre.
We are also doing a lot of work to understand how to use slightly coarser variety of wool to produce brilliant feel in the fabric. So hopefully together we can find better applications for coarser wool. I know, Oliver, you know about that project, but we are working together.
Just don't tell our finishing manager, Parik, because that's what we sort of pay him to do, which is sort of make it feel nicer and softer, and there you go. But no, it's another exciting project that you guys are on with, and we're delighted to.
And I know you're finishing manager, so I'll definitely.
I know. Yeah, he's all right. Yeah.
As a chair, I'm very keen to finish on time because that is the only way I'm judged about how I've done today. So I'll ask the final question. As a university, a department, a school, our brand is we pride ourselves for producing graduates who are ready for the industry. And a lot of effort for us goes into that area so that we create undergraduate students who are ready for the industry and master's, PhD. So one thing is obviously how we are doing, and what do you think, how we can better ourselves? Any suggestion for me and my team?
Well, I think I've had some experience with dealing with undergraduates and graduates who've come out of as a manufacturer. It tends to happen, and one of the things I really love about the industry is actually talking to these people and seeing if we can make something work for them, particularly if they're deciding to go out on their own. I think what I've noticed in the past is you tend to get one of two groups of people. You get someone with a very, very clearly defined idea on the design and what they want to achieve, but with very little understanding of the commerciality behind it. Or you get somebody who comes to a manufacturer like us or another British mill and says, look, this is the sort of thing that I want to do, and I'm very keen to work with you to see how I can make that work. And I've got a bit of money behind me to get myself off the ground. And I've also got a route to market. I think of two people that I always think about, and it was in my previous job when I worked in London, and they both came out of Central St Martin's at the same time. And one of them had the most wacky, crazy, brilliant designs, would have been perfect at one of the couture houses, but had no clue that it was going to, the lead times, had no idea what it was going to cost, had no idea how she was going to take that forward and actually get it to the market. And the other one had a pretty loose understanding of what they wanted to do, but they'd already spoken to Harrods, they'd already spoken to Selfridges and said, look, I'm coming out of Central St. Martin's and this is the sort of thing I want to be doing. Do you think this could be of interest? And he secured a listing at Liberty's. And it was, and I don't know what's happened to that, but that was the one that we were able to make something work, because they were able to work with us as a manufacturer to get product in front of people, and then they took that forward. Whereas the one who had the amazing designs, that one fell down. Now that's just one example, and I'm not saying that somebody shouldn't follow their dream, and if they've got wonderful designs, they should make that work and do anything they can. But I would say that a very clear understanding of the industry, of how sampling works, around wholesaling works, and how the end consumer will perceive that product is absolutely crucial, as well as having those wonderful creative designs that we all want to see and encourage coming out of the universities. Because when you get to sort of my sort of age, all that's gone. You know, you've got nothing left. It's just the day to day, and the creativity is out the window. So we need that coming through as well.
Absolutely. And that actually, that way we can finish on a very nice note where we already do a lot through a mechanism that we got, which is called 3M Buckley's Center, where we are trying to create new entrepreneurs and startup companies. Probably as a subject area, textile and fashion, we also need to work very hard so that we can create new generation entrepreneurs through this initiative. And on that note, Oliver, we just want to thank you for being here today, sharing your prolonged knowledge with us. And this will be really useful to us, our colleagues, our students. So we can only thank you for that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Parik. Thank you very much for having me. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you very much.